Getting older changes how the world looks at you, not suddenly, not dramatically, quietly. One day, people stop asking what you plan to become and start assuming who you already are, and this story begins at that moment. She noticed it in small ways first: a pause before someone offered help she didn't ask for, a sentence that ended a little too quickly, as if her opinion required less explanation now. Nothing rude, nothing obvious, just subtle shifts. Aging does not remove strength, it removes noise. And when noise fades, truth becomes easier to hear. She had lived long enough to understand that self-respect is not something given by others, it is something practiced daily. Her life had never been loud. She did not collect attention, she did not chase recognition. She worked, she raised a family, she made decisions quietly and stood by them. Now, as years passed, she felt a new pressure forming, not to achieve, but to disappear politely. Society rarely says this out loud, but it communicates it clearly. Slow down, step aside, let others decide. She listened carefully, not with anger, with awareness. Self-respect in aging is not about resisting change, it is about refusing erasure. She did not deny her age, she accepted it fully. But acceptance did not mean surrender. Her body moved differently now, slower, more deliberate. But her mind had grown sharper. Experience does that. She noticed how quickly people confuse speed with relevance, as if moving fast is the same as moving wisely. Wisdom does not rush, it waits. There were moments when she felt invisible. Standing in line, sitting in meetings, speaking softly while louder voices filled the space. Invisibility tests self-respect more than insult ever could, because insult can be challenged. Invisibility must be confronted internally. She chose not to withdraw, she chose presence. Presence does not demand attention, it commands it quietly. She spoke when something mattered, not to prove knowledge, but to add clarity. Some listened, some did not. She did not measure her worth by the response. Self-respect does not depend on applause, it depends on alignment. Alignment between values and behavior, between experience and voice. She had learned long ago that dignity does not require explanation, it requires consistency. There were days when others treated her gently, as if fragility had replaced capability. She corrected that assumption calmly, not by arguing. By acting, she made decisions, she maintained boundaries, she declined what did not respect her time. Time becomes precious with age, not because there is less of it, but because it is understood. Understanding time changes priorities. She no longer apologized for rest, she no longer explained her pace. Self-respect does not ask permission to exist. She watched others struggle with aging. Some resisted it angrily, some surrendered to it passively. She chose a third path: acceptance with authority. Authority built on lived experience, not control. Experience cannot be rushed, it cannot be replaced, it can only be ignored, and that is society's loss, not hers. She noticed how younger people often feared aging. They spoke of it as decline. She understood why. No one teaches dignity anymore. Dignity is not trending, but it endures. She did not chase relevance, she cultivated steadiness. Steady people age differently. They do not panic at change, they adapt without losing themselves. There were moments when loneliness appeared, not because she was alone, but because independence creates distance. She accepted that too. Self-respect sometimes costs companionship, but it preserves self-trust. Self-trust matters more in later years, it replaces validation. She trusted her instincts now, not blindly, through evidence, evidence collected across decades. She no longer argued to be understood, she spoke clearly and let silence handle the rest. Silence, when paired with self-respect, is powerful. She knew who she was even when others did not ask. Aging did not shrink her life. It refined it. Refinement removes excess, drama, urgency, needless explanation. What remained was essence. Essence carries dignity naturally. She understood something deeply now. Self-respect is not loud resistance. It is quiet refusal to diminish oneself, and that refusal becomes more important with age. This was only the beginning of her understanding, because aging does not stop testing self-respect, it challenges it in new ways. The next challenge would come not from strangers, but from expectations placed by familiarity, and that test would require even more clarity. Self-respect becomes more complicated when aging meets familiarity. Strangers may overlook you, but family often redefines you, and that redefinition can be harder to navigate. She felt it first at home, not through words, but through decisions made without her. Plans discussed after they were finalized, choices explained instead of shared. It was not intentional. Most loss of dignity never is. It comes disguised as concern. Family meant well. They worried about her energy, her comfort, her safety. Concern, however, can quietly turn into control if left unquestioned. She understood their intentions, but understanding does not require surrender. Aging with self-respect means learning when to accept help and when to protect autonomy. Autonomy is not stubbornness, it is identity in motion. She noticed how easily independence is mistaken for risk once age enters the conversation. Let us handle that. You don't need to worry about this. We'll take care of it for you. Each sentence sounded supportive. Each one removed a layer of agency. Agency matters deeply in later years, not because decisions are always correct, but because making them affirms existence. She did not resist immediately, she observed. Observation brings clarity without creating conflict. She saw how quickly roles shifted, from contributor to recipient, from decision maker to observer. The shift was subtle, but its impact was heavy. Self-respect began requiring boundaries. Boundaries are uncomfortable, especially with people who love you. She did not draw them harshly, she drew them clearly. She spoke when choices affected her directly. She asked to be included, not consulted afterward. Some listened, some struggled, changed challenges, habits, even loving ones. She remained calm. Calm disarms resistance better than anger. She explained that independence was not rejection of care. It was partnership. Partnership does not end with age, it evolves. She accepted assistance without surrendering authority, authority over her time, her space, her preferences. Preferences are often dismissed in older age as convenience, but preferences reflect values. Values deserve respect. She refused to apologize for wanting things done a certain way. Self-respect does not apologize for clarity. There were difficult conversations, moments when disappointment surfaced, not because she was wrong, but because expectations had to be adjusted. Adjustments take time. She remained patient without becoming passive. Passivity erodes dignity. Patience preserves it. She learned to say no without explanation. Explanations invite negotiation. Boundaries do not. No became a complete sentence, not often, but when necessary. She noticed something unexpected. The more she honored herself, the more others recalibrated. Respect teaches people how to treat you. Some relationships improved. They became more honest, more balanced. Others grew distant, not out of cruelty, but discomfort. Discomfort reveals dependency. She accepted that too. Self-respect cannot preserve every relationship in its previous form. Preservation is not the goal. Alignment is. She chose alignment over approval. That choice strengthened her internally. She no longer feared being labeled difficult. Difficult often means unwilling to disappear. She reflected on her own parents, how aging had changed them. How she had once confused care with control. Understanding arrived late, but understanding still arrived. She forgave herself for what she had not known then. Forgiveness is part of self-respect. She noticed younger family members watching quietly. They learned more from her boundaries than from any advice she could give. Modeling dignity teaches silently. She did not demand independence, she practiced it. Practicing independence looks like daily choices, cooking when possible, deciding schedules, managing small responsibilities. Small responsibilities preserve confidence. Confidence preserves clarity. She refused to let convenience replace competence. Competence evolves with age, it does not vanish. She chose her battles carefully. Not every moment required assertion. Wisdom knows when to speak and when to observe. Her calm presence shifted dynamics slowly, not through confrontation, through consistency. Consistency builds trust. Trust allowed collaboration instead of control. She understood something important now. Self-respect in aging is not about doing everything alone. It is about being included with dignity. Included in conversations, included in decisions, included as a whole person, not a responsibility. She accepted help when it was offered respectfully. She declined it when it was imposed. That distinction mattered. She felt steadier, more grounded, less reactive. Her identity no longer felt threatened by assistance. Because she had protected its core, the family adjusted gradually, not perfectly, but meaningfully. She knew more challenges would come. Aging does not pause complexity. The next challenge would arrive from the outside world again: healthcare. Systems, institutions, places where dignity is often standardized instead of personalized. Navigating those spaces would require a different kind of self-respect, one built on voice, not resistance. And that lesson would test her clarity once more. Self-respect is tested differently outside the comfort of familiar relationships. In public spaces, it is often measured, categorized, and processed, and aging makes that process more visible. She noticed it in waiting rooms, the way assumptions formed quickly, the way explanations were simplified, the way decisions were discussed as if she were not fully present. No one was intentionally unkind. Most systems are not built on cruelty, they are built on efficiency. Efficiency, however, often overlooks dignity. Healthcare was where this became most apparent. Forms replaced conversation, protocols replaced curiosity. She respected expertise, but respect did not mean silence. Silence is often mistaken for agreement, and agreement, when assumed, removes choice. She prepared before appointments now. Questions written down, concerns clearly stated. Preparation restored balance. She learned to speak slowly, clearly, without apology. Apologies weaken authority, especially unnecessary ones. She noticed how easily older voices are redirected rather than heard. We'll take care of that. That's normal at your age. There's nothing to worry about. Reassurance without listening is dismissal in disguise. She asked follow-up questions, not confrontational, intentional. She asked for explanations, not conclusions. Explanations respect intelligence. Conclusions assume limitation. Some professionals adjusted immediately, others resisted. Resistance often comes from habit, not disrespect. She remained composed. Composure preserves credibility. She understood something important. Self-respect in these spaces is not about challenging authority. It is about claiming participation. Participation affirms presence. She brought someone with her when situations felt overwhelming, not to speak for her, to support clarity. Support does not replace voice, it strengthens it. She made choices deliberately, accepted recommendations selectively. Asked for time when needed. Time is a right, not a privilege. She rejected the idea that aging meant urgency in decisions. Urgency often benefits systems, not individuals. She also noticed how aging changes visibility in everyday interactions. Banks, stores, public services. Transactions became transactional, not relational. She adjusted expectations without lowering standards. Lowering standards is quiet surrender. She maintained eye contact, spoke clearly, waited for acknowledgement. Presence commands respect even when attention is scarce. She noticed how younger people responded. Some were patient, some rushed. She did not internalize impatience. Impatience reflects environment, not worth. Self-respect requires separating external behavior from internal value. She reminded herself daily that dignity does not expire. Aging did not make her less capable, it made her more discerning. Discernment is often misunderstood. It looks like hesitation to those who rush. She trusted her pace. Trusting your pace is one of the hardest forms of self-respect. She watched peers withdraw from public life, not from inability, but from exhaustion. Exhaustion comes from constantly proving relevance. She refused to perform relevance. She chose presence instead. Presence requires less energy and offers more stability. She participated selectively, chose environments that valued conversation over speed. She cultivated routines that reinforced independence, walking daily. Managing appointments, staying informed. Information is empowerment. She stayed curious. Curiosity keeps identity active. Aging often pressures people to become predictable. She resisted that. Predictability limits growth. She learned new systems slowly. Technology frustrated her at times, but frustration did not equal incapacity. She asked for help without embarrassment. Help does not diminish intelligence. Shame around learning is socially constructed. She released it. She noticed how often older adults are spoken about, not spoken to. She corrected that gently by responding, by asking questions, by staying engaged. Engagement is a form of resistance, quiet resistance. She did not seek confrontation. She sought inclusion. Inclusion affirms dignity. She accepted that systems move slowly, but individuals within systems can still choose respect. She aligned herself with those individuals. Alignment creates community. Community reinforces self-respect. She felt less isolated now, not because challenges disappeared, but because she navigated them intentionally. Intentional living becomes more important with age. She understood now that aging does not require shrinking life. It requires refining engagement. Refinement protects energy. Energy matters more than time. She chose where to spend it, who to engage with, what to accept. These choices restored agency. Agency strengthens self-respect. She noticed a shift in how others responded. Not everyone, but enough to matter. Respect is often reciprocal. When modeled consistently, it invites reflection. She felt prepared for what lay ahead, not because she knew outcomes, but because she trusted herself to respond with dignity. The next phase of aging would test something deeper, not voice, not boundaries, but identity itself. When roles change permanently and labels begin to replace names, that transition would require redefining self-respect from within, and that lesson would be the most personal of all. There comes a point in aging when self-respect is tested not by how others treat you, but by how you see yourself when familiar roles begin to fade. For her, that moment arrived quietly, not with a major event, but with a question she did not expect to feel uncertain about. What do I do now? For decades, her days had structure, work, responsibilities, people who needed her. Those roles had shaped her identity. Not entirely, but significantly. When those roles began to change, something deeper shifted. Retirement did not feel like freedom at first, it felt like silence. Silence can be peaceful or unsettling. Without schedules, without external demands, she felt moments of disorientation, not boredom, loss of relevance. Society often celebrates retirement as an ending, but endings can feel like erasure if not reframed. She resisted the idea that her usefulness had expired. Self-respect required redefining purpose without borrowing it from productivity. Productivity is loud, purpose is quiet. She began by observing her days, what brought calm. What drained energy, awareness replaced urgency. She noticed how often people asked what she did for a living, and how awkward the answer felt now. She adjusted the answer slowly, not defensively, honestly. I'm learning how to live differently. That answer surprised people. It surprised her too. Living differently requires courage. There is no script. She stopped measuring days by output. She measured them by presence. Presence became her new metric. Was she
The next
engaged? Was she
station is
attentive? Was she
Terminus.
aligned? Alignment mattered more than achievement now. She revisited interests long ignored, reading slowly, walking without destination, listening without multitasking. These were not hobbies. They were reclamations. She reclaimed time, time once fragmented by obligation. Reclaiming time restored agency. She noticed how society undervalues reflection. Reflection does not produce visible results, but it produces clarity. Clarity sharpened her sense of self. She understood now that identity must evolve with circumstance. Holding on to outdated roles creates quiet resentment. Resentment erodes self-respect. She released titles that no longer fit. Not bitterly, gratefully, gratitude softened the transition. She saw peers struggle during this phase. Some clung to past authority, others withdrew completely. Both responses came from fear, fear of becoming irrelevant. She chose a third path. Integration honors the past without being trapped by it. She integrated experience into wisdom, wisdom into guidance, guidance into quiet contribution. She did not seek platforms, she offered presence. People began to approach her differently now, not for answers, for perspective. Perspective is earned slowly. It cannot be rushed. She did not rush to advise. Advice often carries ego. She listened first. Listening preserved dignity for both sides. She realized something important. Purpose does not require visibility. It requires meaning. Meaning is personal. It does not need consensus. She volunteered selectively, not to fill time. To stay connected, connection replaced validation. She felt lighter now, not because life had fewer challenges, but because expectations had shifted. She no longer compared her life to younger timelines. Comparison is unfair across seasons. Each season has its own pace. She accepted slower rhythms, not as decline, as refinement. Refinement removes excess motion, it leaves intention. She noticed her confidence change. It was no longer reactive, it was grounded. Grounded confidence does not announce itself, it shows up consistently. She maintained routines that reinforced independence, morning walks, personal projects, health decisions made deliberately. Deliberate living strengthened self-respect. She understood now that purpose in later life is not about proving worth, it is about honoring experience. Experience deserves space. She created that space intentionally in her schedule. In her relationships, in her mind. Mindset matters more than circumstance as roles change. She refused to label herself as done. Completion implies finality. She was still evolving. Evolution does not stop with age. It slows, but it deepens. Depth replaced speed. She felt prepared for what lay ahead, not because everything was defined, but because her sense of self was no longer dependent on role. That independence protected dignity. One final test remained, the test of acceptance when physical limitations appear, not temporary ones, permanent changes, changes that cannot be worked around with attitude alone. Meeting those changes without losing self-respect would require grace. Grace grounded in self-trust. That would be the final lesson, and it would redefine self-respect at its deepest level. There comes a stage in life when strength is no longer measured by what you can push through, but by how you accept what cannot be changed without losing yourself. This is where self-respect is tested most deeply. Physical aging arrives differently for everyone, sometimes gradually, sometimes all at once. A movement that takes longer, an energy that fades earlier in the day, a recovery that requires patience instead of effort. She noticed these changes quietly, not with panic, with awareness. Awareness does not deny reality, it meets it honestly. There were things she could no longer do the way she once had. She acknowledged that without resentment. Resentment wastes energy that aging cannot afford. Self-respect at this stage meant adjusting expectations without shrinking identity. She refused to speak harshly to herself. The body was not failing her, it was communicating. Listening replaced resistance. She learned to rest without labeling it weakness. Rest became strategy. She noticed how society treats physical limitation as loss of worth, as if usefulness depends entirely on output. She rejected that belief quietly. Beliefs do not require permission to be released. She redefined strength. Strength became adaptability. Adaptability preserves dignity when force no longer serves. There were moments of frustration. She did not pretend otherwise. Acceptance does not eliminate emotion. It allows emotion to pass without shaping identity. She grieved certain losses, not dramatically, privately. Grief acknowledged, honored what had been. Avoided grief turned into bitterness. She chose honesty over denial. She asked for help when necessary, not apologetically, clearly. Asking for help did not make her dependent, it made her practical. Self-respect does not mean doing everything alone. It means participating in decisions about how help is received. She maintained choice. Choice preserved dignity. She noticed how differently she was treated now. Some people spoke louder as if volume replaced clarity, some simplified explanations. She corrected gently, she asked to be addressed directly. Directness affirmed presence. She did not tolerate being spoken over, not with anger. With calm insistence. Calm insistence carries authority. She learned to conserve energy carefully. Energy was no longer endless, it became valuable. She spent it where it mattered, on conversations that nourished, on activities that grounded. She released what drained her. Release is an act of self-respect. She no longer explained her limitations excessively. Explanations invite judgment. Boundaries protect peace. She trusted others to adjust. And if they did not, she adjusted her distance. Distance can be respectful. She found peace in smaller moments, morning light, familiar routines, quiet reflection. These moments carried meaning without demanding effort. She noticed how much she still offered: perspective, calm, reassurance. Contribution did not end with physical strength, it transformed. Transformation is not loss, it is evolution. She accepted that some days would feel heavier. She did not judge those days. Judgment drains resilience. She practiced patience with herself. Patience deepened compassion. Compassion softened self-talk. Self-respect in later years is closely tied to how one speaks inwardly. She spoke kindly to herself, not indulgently. Honestly, honesty builds trust. Trust stabilizes identity. She reflected on her life as a whole, not to evaluate success, to acknowledge continuity. Continuity mattered more than achievement. She had shown up repeatedly. She had adapted. She had learned. She had remained herself through changing circumstances. That consistency defined her more than any single role or ability. She felt gratitude now, not because life was easy, because it had been meaningful. Meaning does not require perfection. It requires engagement. She engaged until she could not, and when she could not, she rested without shame. Rest became dignity's companion. She prepared gently for the future, not with fear, with intention. She organized practical matters, not morbidly, responsibly. Responsibility reduced anxiety. Anxiety erodes peace. She wanted her later years to reflect the same values that guided her earlier ones: clarity, respect, choice. She accepted that independence would look different, not disappear. Different. Difference does not equal deficiency. She allowed herself to be seen as she was, not as she had been. Self-respect does not cling to past versions. It honors the present one. She understood now that dignity is not maintained by control. It is maintained by acceptance with boundaries. Boundaries protected her humanity even as her body changed. She felt complete in a new way, not finished. Integrated. Integration brought peace. She no longer feared being reduced to age. Age had become context, not definition. She lived attentively, listened deeply, responded thoughtfully. These qualities did not diminish with age, they matured. She realized something profound. Aging with self-respect is not about resisting the end. It is about living fully until the end arrives. Living fully does not mean doing more, it means being present. Presence outlasts ability. She felt calm in that understanding. Her life did not need to be loud to be complete. It needed to be honest. Honest with limitation, honest with strength, honest with change. That honesty carried dignity to the very end. Aging had not taken her self-respect. It had clarified it, and clarity, once earned, cannot be taken away.